Hello, everybody. Welcome to
Hello.
Good Gut Live. We are live and it is Friday, which is our live day. And let me say live one more time. And we're excited to be here with you. This is another Good Gut Live. The topic is very dense. So we're going to do some disclaimers. Again, we are going live on the topic of Hashimoto's, kind of all things kind of connected to the thyroid, gut, IBS. There's many avenues, many routes and branches and roadways we can take, but was a request. This is how you know it's live, because the request wasn't that long ago. And we're like, let's do that. We love that. For those of you that don't know, we'll get into Dahlia's story a little bit more. We'll get into a lot here, but we're probably going to make a part 2. If you guys enjoy this topic, we can dive a little bit deeper. We can do a lot more with it. But for right now, again, the topic is Hashimoto's, really the thyroid gut IBS connection when it comes to your thyroid. So we're excited. Again, we can see your questions. So if you're popping in questions and comments down below, we can see those. We already have some questions coming in, so we'll be answering those. And yeah, and as always, you can catch the replay on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, anywhere you can find podcasts or videos, Facebook, or also live on Instagram. So we're excited. Those that don't know, my name is James Marin. I'm an integrated registered dietitian, environmental nutritionist.
I'm Dahlia Marin, an integrative dietitian, certified gastrointestinal nutritionist, and the both of us are the co-founders of Married to Health. And at Married to Health, our mission is to help you and those you love heal with each meal. And we have a team of amazing integrative dietitians to help you do that with whatever really you're dealing with. We all have kind of our own specialties, but my specialty is gut health. So I'm excited to put those puzzle pieces together kind of as just a natural specialty, in that autoimmune disease and gut health really do connect to one another and correlate with one another. And I myself am someone who has been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. So I'll be sharing both the data and what I've read as a professional, and kind of anecdotes and what I've lived as a personal note of somebody who's lived with an autoimmune disease now for almost 20 years. I'm sure it's been going on longer, but diagnosed and official for almost 20 years of my life. So we're going to talk about both and what that looks like on a day-to-day basis, what the latest data is. We did a deep dive. Our team all got together and, we put together the latest data in what we're seeing of the gut thyroid connection. So I'm excited to be here. Share, again, both expertise and that personal anecdote. So we're excited to have you here. It's a little bit of a full day here. If you all hear a little bit of background noise, we have some things going on at Married to Health headquarters, but we're
just on a
excited.
note, this is live. And so we have a new AC unit. We didn't plan for it to be coming in right now.
Or to be still being put in.
It's still being finished up, but a new AC unit and all that. So that limits us with our dog and where to put her. There's a lot, but hey, we're here. It's going to be great. We love it. So we apologize for any background noise. But okay, but I want to, maybe we start. Are you okay with starting? Because I think you overlooked this, but I love to kind of dive in on this, is Dahlia's story, because one thing that's so important is we started Married to Health. We do what we do because we lived with disease, because Dahlia lived with disease, because as someone who loves Dahlia, I've seen her hunched over in pain with IBS. I've seen her struggle with her thyroid. And I mean, the list goes on and on. Cold hands and feet, from the simple cold hands and feet to, hair issues, to fatigue, to, the thyroid is very powerful, and it's connected to so many, really it's connected to everything. And so when that is going haywire, when you're not sure what's going on, it can be severely debilitating. It can be not just affecting you, but everyone you love in your family, your spouse, your loved ones, your kids. The list goes on and on. So, maybe touch on that a little bit, like what you felt, what you went through, and then how you kind of continue.
I think for those who might know us, we were seeing a lot of our friends and patients and, those in our community pop in. Thank you all for being here. But, like I said, I've had this diagnosis officially for almost 20 years now. And it all was diagnosed almost around the same time. If you've heard me share my story on a podcast or elsewhere, I really looking back, did not receive adequate medical care growing up. I had, a family doctor who was a friend of my parents who would really just criticize me for being an overweight and then obese child. He never once ran blood work, never once thought to look deeper into anything, even refer me to a therapist for my emotional eating, nothing like that. It was kind of just like, here's your antibiotics. And by the way, if you don't know, because you're bigger than all of your peers, you're obese, you're overweight, and you need to lose weight. And so it wasn't until I was in my late teens that I brought it up to my mom and I was like, something's wrong. I can hear my blood kind of whooshing in my arteries. Is that normal? And she was like, I don't know. Let's go see a specialist. So she took me to an ear, nose, and throat specialist because it was in my ear that I became aware of the symptom. And he looked at me, didn't even need to look in my ear to say this. And he was like, you have a goiter.
He's like, you're a mess, girl.
Yeah. He's like, your thyroid is so inflamed and swollen.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, he looked in my ears. He said, nothing is wrong with your ears. You need to see an endocrinologist. And so I went to the endocrinologist. Thank God I was referred to a really good endocrinologist. He was very thorough. He ran all the blood work. I'd never had blood work in my life up until that point. I was almost into my 20s. I'd never had one blood work done, and he ran everything. And I went back for the results and he was like, guess what? There's a lot going on here. So not only did I have those IBS symptoms and eventually have the IBS diagnosis, he said, your fatigue, your cold, your lethargy, your apathy, it's attributed to hypothyroidism. And you're not just hypothyroid, you have an autoimmune condition that's causing hypothyroidism. And we'll get into that. But I was diagnosed not only with hypothyroidism, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune type of hypothyroidism. At the same time, because my endocrine system, and that affects your metabolism and, so many facets of your life, my endocrine system was overwhelmed, which is why my hormones were off. So I was also diagnosed with prediabetes. My lifestyle warranted that diagnosis, and that tied into my hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal, thyroid axis, and it affected my ovaries as well. So I was also diagnosed with PCOS all in one day. So I was kind of given several prescriptions and told, you probably will struggle with fertility because those with hypothyroidism and PCOS generally do. You are overweight and obese, so you need to work on that, figure it out on your own. And here's medication. I was given 3 medications. I was given thyroid medication. I was given a few different types of birth control and hormone regulators. And I was basically told, good luck. See you in 3 months. We'll see how this medication goes. And so it was really impactful for me because as a child and teen, you're affected by your environment. So clearly, if that was my reality, others in my environment were living that reality to warrant all these diagnoses as well. So I wanted to make sure that was not my future. I said, I'm young enough. I don't want to walk around with my pharmacy. Maybe medication is necessary right now, but I don't want this to be my life, that I'm just accumulating diagnoses. And so, my first step was researching, what is the thyroid? What even is this thing? I never even knew I had a thyroid. It was my first time really hearing about it. I knew my mom had thyroid issues. I never even thought to ask, what is a thyroid and what does it do? And for those of you who don't know, the thyroid is a butterfly-shaped gland. It is on either side.
Interesting.
Technical difficulties.
This is live, everybody. So I don't, let us know
We're
how
going to mute ourselves so you don't hear that.
Okay.
So sorry.
Continue.
Real life. Okay, so now that our smoke alarm is not going off anymore, we can get back to our story time. So anyways, the thyroid is a butterfly-shaped gland, and you can find it on either side really of your esophagus. And the thyroid is responsible for many different things, but one of them is to make thyroid hormones. So your thyroid and your pituitary gland and your liver are responsible for regulating thyroid hormones. But the thyroid itself is going to make thyroid stimulating hormone. It's supposed to make T4 and it's supposed to make T3. So T4 is inactive thyroid hormone, T3 is active thyroid hormone. And your thyroid hormone is what's going to help with many different things. It helps to regulate your metabolism. It helps with energy and alertness. It helps to communicate signals to your adrenal glands and your brain and the rest of your endocrine system, which, you know, your pancreas is part of your endocrine system, regulating your blood sugar. Your adrenals are indirectly involved in that system as well to regulate your nervous system and those hormones. So, you know, your thyroid is a key player in everyday wellness. And most of us know when your thyroid is under functioning, hypo, and not producing enough hormone, you may see things like lethargy, apathy, weight gain. You could experience hair loss. It can cause hormonal imbalance, which is why a lot of the times women are concomitantly diagnosed with PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and hypothyroidism, because those ovarian functions are going to be influenced by thyroid hormone. Your other hormones are going to be offset. And if your ovaries are responsible for making a majority of your estrogen, when your thyroid's off, it's going to say, hey, hold on, we need to figure out this whole estrogen piece. So, you know, it can affect so many different things. It can affect reproduction. It can affect so many facets and functions of the body. And so, you know, I've had that double whammy. I had kind of that triple whammy of obesity, you know, anxiety, hypothyroidism, PCOS. And so I had to really learn, okay, what does my thyroid need? So I first started with, okay, I think that I'm putting too much stress on my metabolic system with just these very calorie but not nutrient dense foods that I'm consuming. I was very overfed, undernourished. I would eat a lot of processed food, but it wasn't very nutritive. So that was my first step. That was my first thing I researched of change up nutrition. And again, this was quite a while ago, early 2000s, and a lot of people were saying, for the thyroid, avoid soy and avoid eating too much of that pesky broccoli and kale. That's what we heard about back then. Don't eat these goitrogenic foods. These are foods that will bind nutrients that your thyroid needs, and they will cause thyroid inflammation. So I wasn't sure where to go, but I knew, okay, let me cut out processed food. I was eating a lot of processed food. So I said, let me try to, you know, reduce, cut out soda and fast food. Those are my first steps. And then I kept learning about nutrition and learning about certain nutrients that the thyroid is going to thrive on. So we know that things like tyrosine, selenium, zinc, magnesium, vitamin A, vitamin B, vitamin C, vitamin D, all of these are nutrients that the thyroid needs. So eating a wide variety of nutrients is going to be important to provide those different nutrients to the thyroid. Vitamin D is one that most Americans are deficient in, and we really don't get sufficient dietary inputs of that. So vitamin D is often one that those with hypothyroidism need to be conscious of. So I was learning these things along the way. And then I started learning a little bit more, hearing a little bit more, asking more questions, which we're going to get into a little bit more deeply today as well. Like, should I be gluten-free? So after about, 10 years of having this diagnosis and finding like, oh, I'm feeling a little bit better on the medication, but there's more. So learning, should I be gluten-free or not? So we're going to get into that today. And
soy. Should you be eating
I
soy?
eat soy or not?
Big one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So all these questions I had to ask and I had to research and, used that to really support myself first and foremost, and then realize I'm not the only one struggling with this. And I really do believe you can heal with each meal. And that was such a catalyst on my journey to becoming a dietitian because I knew I needed help and there were so many others who needed help as well. So these are questions I've wondered throughout the years, questions I've researched throughout the years. So we're here to kind of clear up a lot of these different questions that you all submitted beforehand. You're all asking today, and I've asked myself as somebody living with
Your questions coming
hypothyroidism.
in. Yes. And then, yeah, I mean, a lot there. So, I mean, we can continue, but yeah, you highlighted, I mean, vitamin D. So these nuggets that we hope you all take away from today are key nutrients and foods that
Mhm.
please keep in your diet. Please know that there is a massive connection, and just really connecting to vitamin D, to a lot of the B vitamins. You said selenium is a big one, these micronutrients that really, it's because of the microbes in the soil and their ability to break down the rocks. Essentially, the simplified version of this is microbes in healthy soil break down rocks. And that's where we get our minerals and trace nutrients. And then those go into the plants we eat. If you don't have enough microbes in healthy soil, you're not going to break down these rocks into the minerals for the plant, right? And then what we do is we use synthetic fertilizers and synthetic nutrients of the soil, add them back in synthetically, and hope the plant survives, really. But that's not working too well for us and farmers in general. So this issue goes really, really deep. But this idea of sourcing great local food, and the idea, like you see us post at the farmers market, and this, it goes back to your thyroid, right?
Mhm.
We see that. Maybe all of you don't see that, but no, really, this is why we post it. This is why we do it. This is why we go really deep. Obviously, it can go surface level, and we say, eat your fruits and vegetables and eat a diversity of plants, go to the farmer's market, and blah blah blah. Oh, it sounds so simple. Oh, that's what's the point? The point goes to your thyroid, to your gut, to your motility, to IBS, to so much. So yeah.
And yeah, absolutely. So we touched on one facet thus far, what nutrients are important for the thyroid. So, we talked about some of those, and that could be a great way to get in additional selenium. Since studies have shown supplementing with at least 200 micrograms of selenium can decrease thyroid antibodies. So having farm fresh local things can be helpful because selenium is found really in things that grow in the ground, or other nuts and seeds. Brazil nuts, for
Yeah, I was gonna
example,
say Brazil
are an
nuts.
incredible source of selenium. You can get too much selenium from Brazil nuts, though, so you really just want to have a few a week, like 2 or 3 Brazil nuts a week.
Mhm.
So, making sure that you're getting in enough selenium, because studies do show that can help reduce inflammation around the thyroid and reduce some of those antibodies as well. Because I always get that question, what's the difference between hypothyroidism and autoimmune hypothyroidism? That's
Good
always
question.
a question that I have if anyone comes to me and says, I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism. I might always ask, have your antibodies been checked?
Mhm.
Are you autoimmune? Because studies show about 90% of hypothyroidism is autoimmune hypothyroidism. So the immune system is erroneously going after and attacking the thyroid gland, maybe because it sees it's malfunctioning and your immune system is always trying to scavenge and clean things up and keep you in tip top shape. So it kind of identifies that thing's not working right. Let me just attack it and try to destroy whatever's malfunctioning. Or it could be after a virus, and maybe viral particles are there and your immune system's going after theirs. Other autoimmune diseases often come about with, viral overload as well. Your immune system's overstimulated and then it kind of is misfiring. So that's always a question. If you've been diagnosed with hypothyroidism, if you know someone who's been diagnosed with hypothyroidism, ask if antibodies have been checked. So you always want to know that. Am I autoimmune? Have my TPO and TGA, that thyroid peroxidase, thyroglobulin antibody, been checked? And TSI. If you're suspicious you might have hyperthyroidism, you want to see, is it hyperthyroid, autoimmune hyperthyroid? Is it Graves? Or if it's hypo, is it Hashimoto's?
Quick note, I'm seeing, for those of you live, someone's asking, where can you ask questions? I see your comment there, right here.
Yeah.
So wherever
And
you're
then-
watching this, in the comments down below, if you're in the chat on YouTube, pop in a question. We're going to try to answer as many as possible. But great.
So that's always first step. And we had somebody submit a question who's in our program, our Good Gut SIBO IBS program, and they said, it's interesting. I went from hypo, so under functioning, to postpartum hyper overfunctioning thyroid. They were just diagnosed, actually, they said today when they submitted this question, with Graves. So it was autoimmune. It's very slight, and all I've eaten is vegan and plant-based for 5 years. So I'd be interested to learn more. And that can happen, especially if it's in the early stages of the condition. Your immune system's still figuring out what it's doing. and what nutrients are there, what you're getting too much of, what you're not getting enough of, which can change in pregnancy because all of a sudden your body's giving things to another being. And so you can swing back and forth between hyper and hypo, especially if you're being treated. They're very careful to treat hypothyroidism in pregnancy because it can cause miscarriage. So it can swing someone from being under functioning to now it's too stimulated, it's hyper functioning and it's over functioning, and that can cause its own set of symptoms. So we talked about the hypo symptoms, hyper symptoms, too efficiently functioning thyroid, which is also not great, can lead to heart palpitations, anxiety, sleep issues, sweat, weight loss. Sometimes you'll see eyes bulging and just the adrenals being overtaxed in an overly functioning thyroid. So you don't want to be hyper and overfunction. You don't want to be hypo and underfunction. And interestingly, in the data, like we said, we'll get into the whole gluten piece and goitrogenic food piece, but the data also did show that the gut plays a huge role in whether you're hyper or hypothyroid.
And then there was a great study recently, more specifically on Graves' disease itself and the connection to the gut microbiome. So it's really cool because a while back, I say like maybe a decade plus, we didn't have these connections. We were kind of just guessing, best guesses, or I would say educated guesses of going, wow, this microbiome is amazing. I'm sure it connects to everything, but it was more like an educated guess. Now researchers have caught up to where we're able to go, oh, wow, there's a study on that. There's a study on the thyroid gut. There's a study on Graves' disease and the gut microbiome. There's a study on hypo and hyperthyroidism. There's a study on Hashimoto's and the gut microbiome. So it's really, really cool to get into these more specific areas of the gut microbiome, which is a trend we've been seeing over the last decade to 15 years. And just all this research coming out, and it's really cool. For many, it's affirming kind of these educated guesses, and for some, it's opening new worlds of possibilities and going, oh wow, I didn't even realize this. And I think one of the big ones you mentioned it earlier about viruses and getting sick and catching a virus, COVID. If we all remember that, from not too long ago.
Epstein-Barr virus, cytomegalovirus.
Yes.
These have been implicated in autoimmune hypothyroidism as well. So if you have a past history of your virome, which is basically the
world of viruses.
The world of viruses themselves, the genes that they contain and the genetic mutations that they can cause, that can change what's going on in your gut and your immune system. And, most of us have heard, because especially in the last 4 years, it's been said over and over, your gut contains a lot of your immune system. You have something called gut-associated lymphoid tissue, and that accounts for 70 to 80+% of your immune cells. So changes in the gut, whether there are inflammatory changes elicited by a virus like COVID, like Epstein-Barr, like cytomegalovirus, it could even be Lyme. We do know that these things then change the bacteria. So they change your microbiome, because your microbiome is different than your virome. And then that can change your immune system, and it can overstimulate the immune system. And that can, again, lead to autoimmune conditions. So there have been studies in both Hashimoto's, hypothyroid, and Graves', which is hyperthyroid, that have implicated specific types of bacteria and viruses as being higher in those with these diagnosed conditions. So always ask more. If you've been diagnosed with one of these things, it's thinking back. Okay, I know for myself, I've had Epstein-Barr severely in the past. So that combined with I had really severe food poisoning. I had IBS. I've had E. coli in my gut through the food poisoning. It's all led up to that diagnosis. I wasn't just out of nowhere. I got a little flu and then I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's. It was a very wide culmination of different things.
And for those that have been following us, you've probably heard us say this before, but for those that are new, we have to say your virome and viruses are there to help you for the most part, just like many of the bacteria, even parasites. We've touched on the parasitome, which is the whole world of parasites that live inside of you. I know there's a lot of, fear. I mean, there's a lot of fear around everything, but especially parasites lately. We're seeing all these parasite cleanses, and and so on and so forth. But it's understanding these worlds, just like the outside world. There's the world of snakes, and there's the world of rats, and there's a world of tigers and coyotes. They're all trying to coexist and balance one another. That is exactly what's happening inside of you. It's this world of viruses and bacteria and parasites, and they're all kind of there to help balance one another. It's just when an earthquake happens, or when your world gets flipped upside down, so does their world.
Yeah.
And then it's every microbe for themselves. It's every virus for themselves, and they kind of get out of whack, right? So it's identifying, like Dahlia mentioned in the beginning of this episode today, it's understanding what happened in my world, right? What the heck was going on? For many of us, it's antibiotics. For some of us, it's trauma, it's stress, it's all of this going on, and that'll activate different areas of this trauma response, of this inflammatory response, of this autoimmune response in your body. And this is important to say, a disclaimer. I think this is a great time to say it, is we're not medical doctors. We're integrative registered dietitians. This is not medical advice. Please seek ideally integrative medical advice. We can be part of your care team, but we are not the sole people on your care team. So we are here to share really evidence-based and just experience-based information, and you kind of take it from there. But again, do not substitute medical advice for these videos, or for listening to this podcast as your own medical advice. So just want to say that. Thank you for watching this. We hope you know by now, Married to Health really does everything we do coming from a need in our community, a need from our patients, a need from being dietitians for over a decade, from running our own private practice. And we continued that when we formulated Gut Nurture. So if you didn't know, Dahlia Marin, RDN, LD, CGN, formulated Gut Nurture along with Complement. We truly believe it is a great complement for your gut health journey. Why is that? Well, it's low histamine, it's low FODMAP, it's organic, even the package is compostable. We really designed it with a patient in mind that is wanting to eat more plants, that needs to eat more plants, but is struggling to eat more plants. This is that bridge. We also designed it for the person who's just like, I want to boost my gut, I want to feel really good, I want to help with the structure, function, and population of the gut. This is unlike anything that's really out there, in that as it's focused on being a prebiotic, not really a probiotic. So the idea here, you can think of Gut Nurture as compost for your gut ecosystem. It's not trying to force seeds and the probiotics in, it's trying to create a beautiful environment and a beautiful foundation. So any seeds you get from the fermented foods you're eating, from your environment, from the beautiful habits you're building, whether you're working with us or not, they are going to fall on this beautiful, healthy soil with this beautiful, healthy compost, and create a lush, beautiful ecosystem and garden, creating an abundance of fruit and postbiotics that are going to keep you healthy and thriving. So click down below, learn more about Gut Nurture, and we'll continue with the episode.
But if you have had, again, like I said, I can't reinforce this enough because I see this happen too often. If you've been told your thyroid is off,
yes,
always ask for those antibodies to be checked, because I've had other people who have normal antibodies and their thyroid's off, but it comes down to a nutritional deficiency, nutrient deficiency. So they have low zinc levels, or usually it's low iodine levels. So usually then just supplementing with iodine helps to correct that. And then they're no longer hypothyroid. And whether that has to do with the gut or not, that can vary, because we do know iodine is absorbed in the stomach and the small intestine. So if you have gut issues, it can cause just subclinical hypothyroidism, or just, nutrient deficiency hypothyroidism. If you have deeper gut issues and your microbiome and your virome are off, then those involve more of your immune system, and that can then lead to more autoimmune. And so, standard of practice, the first thing your care team is going to recommend to you, from whatever it is, whether it's autoimmune or whether it's just nutrient deficiency, if it's not correctable by adding back those nutrients and it's really out of whack, your care team may suggest medication. And somebody's asking, can Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism be healed, or are they just managed? Are thyroid meds for life? So that's usually standard practice to recommend meds. And that depends. It depends on the level of damage. So I've seen people who, if, let's say, TPO, for example, that thyroid peroxidase antibody, if normal levels, some say it's less than 9, others say it's less than 35. Let's go with 35 because more people say that than not. So if your normal levels are less than 35 for that thyroid peroxidase antibody and you're at 40, you're not too far off. So maybe if you do a little work on your gut, add in some iodine if you need it, change up your diet a little bit, and your thyroid antibodies come down, you have the potential to not need medication or get off of your medication. So that person is in a much better place. I will take myself as an example because I've had people ask me, do you take medication? And I used to be ashamed to say yes. And now I'm like, yeah, I do. Because when I was diagnosed, my TPO was over 3,500. So that's the max the lab could read. The lab cannot read higher than 3,500. So I have no idea what my true initial level was because it could have been 3,501. It could have been 70,000. I have no idea.
It was off the
It
charts
was off the charts.
in a
It
bad
couldn't
way.
it couldn't be quantified.
Yeah.
Because I endured so much damage to my thyroid, I really can't get off of medication. My thyroid does not function on its own anymore because my immune system has destroyed so much of my thyroid. And we've seen that in ultrasounds I've had done. I've even worked with my own integrative team to try to get on supplements and support and go that route instead. And the way that I felt was like, okay, I need this medication. And I've said this before. It's almost like someone with type 1 diabetes saying, "Can I get off insulin?" Probably not. Your immune system has destroyed so much of your pancreas, you probably will need insulin for the rest of your life. You might decrease the amount of insulin that you need. We've seen that with amazing programs like Mastering Diabetes and others, but you probably are not going to just not need insulin anymore. Sometimes when the immune system is involved, it's damaged the organ to a severe degree where medication is going to give you quality of life. And I saw that for myself. I had really poor quality of life when I was off of my medication. Now, I take at this point in my life less than a quarter of the amount of medication that I used to take when I was first diagnosed, and my lifestyle is very different. So I'm very grateful for that. But I personally do take medication. So again, that depends on your level of severity of the condition. So we start with nutrition first. Again, low hanging fruit is to say, let me make sure my vitamin D levels, my zinc levels, my magnesium levels, I'm getting in vitamin C, which is an essential nutrient, meaning your body can't make it. You need it in your diet. So start there. Make sure you're getting all those thyroid supporting nutrients. And if you don't know how, a dietitian can definitely be helpful. If you need medication, work with your care team to decide, is this a long-term thing for me or is this a short-term thing for me? And, with medication, again, I'm not a medical doctor. I don't prescribe medication. I cannot give you advice on your medication, but I can just educate because we are trained in drug nutrient interactions and to know about medications. Usually they'll start with T4. So it's a synthetic version of an inactive thyroid hormone, and your thyroid and liver and gut are needed to activate that and turn it into active T3. If that doesn't work, sometimes you need to also add T3, especially if you have liver disease or you have had severe damage to your thyroid, you might not convert very well. So that's where you're asking your care team as well. Can you check my reverse T3? Can you check my total T3? Can you make sure that one, this is even enough T4, so you're checking that too. Can you check if I can convert it or if my body is just bouncing it right back because it doesn't have the capacity to do that? And then, again, that can kind of help you and your care team, your prescriber, determine, can I get off this medication or is this a forever thing for me? So hopefully that helps to clarify that.
Really great. Really great. Some really great questions come in. Do you want to continue with questions or what? Where are you feeling?
Yeah. So, I want to continue with some of the questions we got before from our Good Gut group because, we have some great questions here. So are there any specific things I should do nutritionally since I had my thyroid removed in a total thyroidectomy in 2012 because I had papillary thyroid carcinoma? So this person had thyroid cancer. And so they removed the thyroid completely and they're on thyroid replacement. Do I even need to be concerned with iodine intake while eating high amounts of cruciferous vegetables? So because you're replacing that thyroid hormone, exogenously or outside of the body. It's usually highly regulated. Um, you're not necessarily going to add to that or stimulate any additionally. So you really don't need to be worried about giving the thyroid nutrients to function because you don't have a thyroid. They're basically replacing the thyroid's function. Again, just like they are with insulin with somebody with type 1 diabetes, you're not worried about how you can better support your pancreas. You're being supplemented with those things. You're also not worried about intaking too much iodine if you've had your thyroid removed and you're on hormone replacement because, again, too much iodine is not a thing for you because it's not going to feed a thyroid and make it overactive. So not necessarily in that instance, but this person is asking, will those cruciferous vegetables, so cruciferous vegetables are those sulfur-rich vegetables, and in the cruciferous family, we have things like broccoli, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, asparagus, kale, and way back when, there were some rat studies that showed that cruciferous vegetables can bind to thyroid hormone and reduce efficacy of both internally or endogenously produced thyroid hormone as well as intake of external exogenous thyroid hormone. And so there are a lot of people out there. There still are some people who say, don't eat cruciferous vegetables. If you have hypothyroidism, don't eat broccoli, don't eat cauliflower, don't eat kale. Avoid those foods. They're bad for you. Like I just mentioned a few sentences ago, your liver is vital in the transformation of thyroid hormones. And guess what your liver loves? Cruciferous vegetables. They contain an antioxidant called sulforaphane, and it's a sulfur-based compound, and your liver loves it. Amazing antioxidant. It helps make the body's master antioxidant called glutathione. So please don't cut out those foods.
Thankfully, all Americans have healthy livers, right? Is that what you're saying?
We'll go there
Thankfully,
today.
yeah, I know. That's a whole nother talk on the liver itself. But yes, I mean, so this is where, again, integrative approach it matters because you're factoring in, oh, how's your liver? How's your pancreas? How's your gallbladder? How, when it comes to the gut, or if we're talking about the thyroid today, we're asking not just how your thyroid is, but how's your gut to absorb the iodine, to absorb the nutrients, to absorb the cruciferous vegetables and the phytonutrients that will then get turned into these amazing antioxidants in the liver. How is all that doing? That matters, right? That's the bigger picture that takes some time to look at. That's why we ask so many questions in our visits and we dive a little bit deeper to look at that bigger picture, because that matters, and that all of those factor into what you'll need, how you're going to absorb, what's going to happen. I think this kind of plays well into this idea of goitrogens.
Because people say those cruciferous vegetables cause low thyroid hormone, and then that's going to cause a goiter. So that's why they're called goitrogenic foods.
Right. And so, you've gotten other goitrogens like soy. I think that comes into play as well, as the cruciferous have been kind of demonized, as well as soy on top of soy, which we've talked about, of like, oh, men should not eat soy. But then also, if you have thyroid issues, don't eat tofu, don't eat soy. It's going to make things worse. It's going to be this goitrogen, and it can affect. Well, we've seen studies where, soy is not this goitrogen. It could be part of a really healthy diet, especially those with thyroid issues. So in a 2024 systemic review, they looked into this, and we looked at the fact that soy did not have this deleterious effect. It did not, have this negative effect on the thyroid. And when comparing these diets and what people ate, we found there was no significant effect, right? So then it begs the question, what is affecting your gut? And what's interesting is we find a lot of people are just kind of avoiding this low-hanging fruit where, alcohol and other things that maybe we're doing on the weekend, and highly saturated fat food that are deep fried, and things we know that affects the gut and the thyroid that people are still doing, but then we're demonizing foods that can actually be beneficial for the thyroid as well as many other vital organs in your body, like soy. So a lot there, and that could be a whole episode.
And a 2023 study actually did say, because of these antioxidants that these cruciferous vegetables possess, and these cruciferous foods and these goitrogenic foods possess, it's recommended to eat them. So they're anti-inflammatory. So leave broccoli alone. Eat your broccoli.
Leave edamame alone,
yeah.
guys. In terms of demonizing it, but eat it.
And really understand when these studies came out, and I always say they're probably well-intentioned studies, a lot of them are rat studies. And
Yeah.
what people don't realize is in rat studies, the amount that they're feeding these rats is ridiculous. It's
Yeah.
usually like half their body weight to their body weight in these compounds. If you eat anything in that amount, I don't care what it is, if you have half your body weight in water, or if you have half your body weight in vitamin D, if you have half your body weight in oxygen, you will have negative effects. So before you're believing some of these different things that, again, I always want to give people the benefit of the doubt and say someone well-intentioned is trying to communicate to you, because hopefully they're trying to help you and not just sell you something. Ask what the data is and where that's coming from. And if you're finding that, like, oh, okay, I asked my dietitian about this, and okay, it was a rat study, and the amount that they were feeding these rats is not an amount I would ever eat, then eat those foods.
And we got to be honest, guys, and Dahlia's giving you the optimistic, I'll be more the pessimistic, and realize, yeah, there are some really bad, poorly designed studies with not so great funding, and that happens too. We're very much plant-based. We love plant foods, but shout out Marion Nestle, who calls out, even the avocado board funds studies, and there's a walnut board that funds studies, and you know and then there's the dairy council that funds study, and the beef council. And so you have to understand study design as well as the funding of the study. And anyone can take an animal study and really anyone can tweak almost any study and make the outcomes in their favor if they make the right tweaks, right, to data and how we analyze the data. So it's important to understand what you're reading, what you're looking at, and understand your own bias. I mean, we are kind of biased towards plants, but not because we just love broccoli so much. It's more
We're not paid by the broccoli board.
We're not paid by any of the vegetable boards, but it's more of just like, wow, this food has been extremely helpful. And once we got the right context, we understood what's happening, what's going on. It's helped my health. It's helped Dahlia's health. It's helped thousands of our patients' health. And so we understand that. And now we're huge proponents of understanding the context. That's why we do these videos and do what we do. But anyway.
So
okay.
Hopefully that put your mind at ease. If your gut can digest those high sulfur, cruciferous, and allium vegetables, eat your onion, garlic, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, soy, eat those things. They're not going to affect your thyroid function unless you're eating pounds of them. Right. Don't eat pounds of anything, really. The one nutrient really that has been implicated the most is calcium. So even if you're taking thyroid medication, it says don't take calcium within 3 hours of taking this thyroid medication. It can bind your thyroid medication. It can, deacidify your stomach acid a little bit. And so that will affect absorption as well. So don't take calcium within 3 hours if you're taking thyroid medication. But other than that, eat your cruciferous vegetables, eat those goitrogenic foods. They are good for you.
Yes.
So our next question that we have, and a question I had and a common question I get is, should I be gluten-free if I'm hypothyroid? And we've talked a lot about gluten-free diets in many contexts for SIBO, for IBS. We might have mentioned this in the past, but I've done a deep dive because I want to know, should I be gluten-free? I have been diagnosed with Hashimoto's. I have hypothyroidism. Is it going to affect my medication absorption? How is gluten going to affect my thyroid at large? And again, it differs. Most of the data that we're seeing is in those with Hashimoto's. And before, it was inconclusive. When I did a deep dive a couple years ago, there was inconclusive evidence that a gluten-free diet will help. However, we know a couple things. One, a lot of the times, if you have one autoimmune condition, studies show you are 30% more likely to develop a second autoimmune condition. Like we said, the gut is very involved and the immune system is very involved in autoimmune thyroid. So you want to make sure you don't have celiac disease. If you've been diagnosed with an autoimmune thyroid condition, or if you have positive thyroid antibodies, rule out celiac disease, because that definitively answers that question for you if you have celiac. If you have celiac, it's another autoimmune condition, and it it's an attack of the villi, the little finger-like projections that help you absorb nutrients when you eat gluten. So if you have celiac disease, don't eat gluten. 1,000,000% for you. Yes, be gluten-free. But we're looking at the data and we're seeing, is there any data to show a gluten-free diet can help reduce thyroid antibodies or help support thyroid function? And the latest answer is yes. So if it's autoimmune hypothyroidism, there are some studies that have concluded that after about 3 to 6 months of being gluten-free, thyroid antibodies can decrease by about 30% on a gluten-free diet. And really, I think it's a culmination of a couple things. We've talked about gluten before, so you can always go back, look at our YouTube for that video. But I think it's one, just how we process wheat in this country and how heavily hybridized and hard to digest American wheat is and how heavily sprayed it is with pesticides and other things that can affect your endocrine system. And I think, another factor in that is that outside of just kind of the quality of the gluten, it's the quantity we eat, and it's in so much processed food. So what I tend to hear from people is, well, when I went gluten-free, most fast food I was eating is gluten containing, and a lot of the processed food that I was eating was gluten containing. So when I went gluten-free, it helped me cut out a lot of processed food. And that's good for your liver. That's good for your gut. That's good for your thyroid. So I do feel like that plays a part into it. But we do have more and more compelling data that came out in 2023, 2024. There were studies that showed that both for Hashimoto's autoimmune hypo and Graves' autoimmune hyper, antibodies did decrease with a 3 to 6 month gluten-free diet. So those are things to consider.
Yes, and one of my favorite studies that we were recently looking at that happened in 2024 was this really cool comparison using a gluten-free Mediterranean diet and a gluten-containing Mediterranean diet, because that really answered the question of is it just we're eating too much? And I think that's a factor for a lot of people, especially in certain parts of the country. I know when we were traveling recently, we were in an airport where everything was like gluten, meat, cheese, gluten, meat, cheese. It was like pizza, gluten, meat, cheese. A hamburger is gluten, meat, cheese. Pasta with meatballs was gluten, meat, cheese. And it was like, what can we get that doesn't have gluten, meat, or cheese?
I just have the tomatoes and lettuce.
Yeah, it's like, I just have tomatoes, basil, and lettuce, I guess. And so it was really interesting. But then when looking at this study, they also found a significant difference in the gluten-free group that also was experiencing some thyroid issues like Hashimoto. So doing a more Mediterranean diet, which is essentially an 80% plant-based diet we're talking about whole plant foods, fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds and beans, as well as being gluten-free, had a significant difference compared to leaving gluten in. So really cool studies that we're seeing now come out in 2023, 2024 that are really kind of answering these questions that we've had educated guesses on. Dahlia's been gluten-free for a long time, and we're like, I feel good, right? It's one thing to say, hey, there's no studies. So Dahlia wasn't like, okay, just because there's no studies, I'm not going to stop being gluten-free. I feel good. So now there's studies to back up, oh, that's why Dahlia feels good, right? And so if you're feeling good, this is one of those instances where, it makes sense with an educated background to go, if you're feeling good on this, and when it comes to gluten-free, let's do it. And we're huge educators on, you can still get whole gluten-free grains. So we're not saying cut out all whole grains and just eat, not to throw anyone under the bus, but like Glutino products where it's all hyper processed gluten-free products. No, you can still get a lot of whole gluten-free grains. Some of our favorites are buckwheat and teff, and still, quinoa and all those gluten-free whole grains that we know and love, and they're delicious, right? And that's a lot of what's in our SIBO IBS programs, introducing a lot of our patients to the whole grain and gluten-free options.
We can't discount, gluten is a protein that's found in wheat.
Right.
So it's a protein peptide. So outside of gluten, that can aggravate, and in some studies show that can mimic proteins in the thyroid. So if your immune system's already targeting your thyroid and then you're eating things that look like the thyroid and you have a leaky gut and those things are now out and about and possibly floating by your thyroid, it's going to overstimulate your immune system. We can't also overlook the FODMAPs that are in wheat. So again, there's such a crossover between IBS, intestinal hyperpermeability or leaky gut, and thyroid issues. They usually go hand in hand. Most of the time, you don't find one without the other. But I think a lot of the times people also see improvements not only in numbers, so they don't only see those, very just concrete data, physiological changes in the numbers, but they also feel less bloated and they feel a little bit better because they're not fermenting those fructans. So those FODMAPs that are found in wheat, and those are carbohydrates. So gluten is a protein, FODMAPs are carbohydrates. So you're going to feel less bloated. And that's what they found in one of these studies. Those who were gluten-free and Mediterranean had a reduction in waist circumference because they were less bloated. So it wasn't just visceral fat, visceral adiposity that went down. It was gas, intestinal gas as well, because they were a little bit less bloated. So gluten-free, again, if you're just clinical hypothyroid, you just need some iodine, correct, and selenium and vitamin D, correct those nutrient deficiencies, you may not need to be gluten-free. If you have autoimmune hypothyroidism, significant gut issues, we'd recommend try it. Try a 3 to 6 month elimination diet. See how you feel. I know for me, I've been gluten free for about, I would say, 12 years now.
Yeah.
And last year we went to Egypt and I was eating a Mediterranean diet there, and it's easy to be plant based in Egypt. It's no problem at all. Actually, most of their staple foods and most popular dishes are vegan and plant based. Gluten-free is a whole nother story there. Everything has,
rough.
It's in pita. They put vermicelli, wheat pasta, even in rice there. Like everything has.
Guys, I even
thicken soup with wheat.
spoke to the chef at one of the places we went to. I was like, please,
they don't even know
my
what
wife
is.
And he spoke really great English.
I spoke to him in Arabic too.
And we spoke, Dahlia spoke to him in Arabic, and still there was just tons of gluten in there. I was like, oh no. Like, what happened?
Yeah. So anyways, that was my trial to say, okay, I ate it because I had to, or I wasn't going to eat some days. And I had joint pain. By the time we got home, after 16 days of eating more gluten than I have in 12 years, I had joint pain. So it's just not for me. I'm not there yet, because I had a patient recently ask me, how much gluten do you eat? Have you added it back in? Because we're working on her adding it back in. She doesn't have thyroid issues, but I was like, I don't. I'm not ready to add it back in. My body's not ready for that. And I had to for a period, and it did not go well. So always listen to your body as well.
Thank you so much for watching this video. We know you're probably getting quite a bit from it. It can be a lot of information, can be overwhelming, and we totally get that. Dahlia was there not too long ago suffering with IBS and SIBO-like symptoms. She was hunched over very often, bloating, gas, constipation, diarrhea, skin issues, hormonal issues, the list goes on and on. So we know this. We've been in practice now as registered dietitians for over a decade, and we created our Good Gut SIBO IBS program for you. If you're experiencing IBS, SIBO symptoms, IMO, SIFO, the list goes on and on. If you're like, I'm not really sure what this is, click down below. We have a free assessment for you, and that'll likely lead you to our Good Gut SIBO IBS program, which is chock full of information we wish we had. It's information that we're giving to our patients, so it's all at your fingertips in one package. It's 7+ hours of video. It is dozens and dozens of handouts. It's tailored meal plans and recipes to truly help you get to the root, to truly help you understand what's going on, so you can truly heal with each meal. Check it out down below.
So hopefully that answers that question about gluten. Trial it if you have positive antibodies, and then have your care team recheck the antibodies. And that's something I run into as well. I know I mentioned in the beginning of the video, figure out if you're autoimmune. Give your care team, I recommend advocate for yourself. If your care team tells you your antibody levels don't matter, you know you're autoimmune, and that's all that matters. The levels don't matter. They do matter. It shows immune activity. So if, again, your antibodies are 3,500 like mine were, that's more severe disease and more involved disease process than someone who has thyroid antibody level at 50. Ask them to recheck them. Demand they recheck them. If they don't want to, you can order them yourself. So Quest gives you a cash pay option. And as long as you're working with someone who can help you interpret them, recheck those things. It's so important to see, is what I'm doing working? Because If it's not, don't keep doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so important to recheck those things. All right, we have a bunch more questions. I want to get in as many of your questions as we possibly can. It's evident this is a hot topic because so many of you are participating and asking questions. So this will very likely be a part 2 and 3. But I want to get in as many of your questions as we possibly can.
What are you saying?
Hair loss. I'm seeing a lot of people mention hair loss. So really just to explain, I think the nutrient deficiency piece of Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism in general, or thyroid disease, whether it's hyper or hypo, there could be nutrient deficiency and inflammation. So again, if we're seeing viruses trigger change sometimes in your immune system, your immune function, and that can elicit a cascade of inflammation that can create hair loss. So we're seeing after COVID, a lot of people experience hair loss because it's an inflammatory virus. So if your disease onset after a virus, or even if you got COVID and it exacerbated it, like I can tell I got COVID back in November, and I always know when my thyroid's off because this part of my eyebrow starts falling out. And I found that. So if you guys look really closely, this eyebrow, my left eyebrow always looks a lot better than my right eyebrow when things are a little bit off with my thyroid. So if you're still experiencing hair loss, you need to bring down your inflammation, and you really need to really foster those nutrients. So make sure you're giving your body those thyroid loving nutrients, really work on bringing down inflammation.
And I can't emphasize enough bringing down the inflammation, because if your gut is inflamed, especially if we're talking about the small intestines, you can't properly absorb nutrients for your hair, on top of the fact of, other factors that
and your
Dahlia
hair and
mentioned.
nails are the last to get nutrients.
Right.
So when there's too much inflammation, those are the first usually that you're going to see. Like my nails are really thin and flaky. My hair is falling out.
Right.
Your body's going to be like, girl, let it go.
Exactly. It's like, well, that's the last. Well, I'm just going to let it go. So your nails are looking messed up, and these are clinical diseases where nails can be altered, where we're seeing physical and physiological manifestations of your nutrient deficiencies. So great questions.
This is an interesting question. So, I want to pedal back before I answer this question. That's really great from Stacy. So, with hypothyroidism, one thing we do see in the clinical data is decreased levels of stomach acid. And so we do know that there tends to be, because of usually nutrient deficiency, hypochlorhydria. So that's low levels of hypochloric acid. And this can be exacerbating of the disease itself, because if we're saying you need iodine for thyroid function and iodine is absorbed in the stomach, but you have low stomach acid, you're going to have improper absorption. So that's where making sure you're supporting nutrient absorption can be important. So for some people, it can be kind of acidifying things, and really making sure, again, zinc levels are on point, because zinc helps with producing stomach acid. So again, go back and make sure that you're not missing those nutrients. If you were on birth control and it depleted magnesium and B vitamins and vitamin D, go back and have your care team check those, replete them, check your zinc levels, just check off all those boxes to say, do I have enough stomach acid to even absorb these nutrients? Dahlia is telling me I need these nutrients. Can I absorb them? Your stomach is needed to absorb these nutrients. So it's the start of the breakdown. So ask yourself, can that be done? But somebody's asking what our thoughts are about SSRIs. So selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors like Zoloft for somebody with Hashimoto's. Those medications can potentially cause damage to the microbiome, correct? However, I do see it potentially helpful. Really a question I want to, preface this, ask your care team, because if your nervous system is completely overwhelmed, that will take precedence, and that can cause hypothyroidism itself. So if the benefits outweigh the risk for you, because an SSRI is going to help you regulate your neurotransmitters and regulate your mood and your nervous system, that's going to benefit you. There are some studies that have found that SSRIs can lower levels of thyroid hormone. It can lower T4, T3. Some studies have found there have been no significant changes, but really, I think it comes down to the person. If you're trying, saffron and all the adaptogens, and you're trying all the things to help regulate your nervous system, you've tried the saw palmetto and the holy basil, and it's just not getting you there, and your care team is recommending an SSRI, that can help benefit your thyroid if, again, stress and trauma are a root cause of your hypothyroidism. So, individual, ask your care team, default to your care team, but really assess the risks and the benefits for you.
And can I just comment? We do have the patience, and this is, again, that's why what Dahlia mentioned, it is checking in with yourself, because if you are trying to work 7 days a week and you have 5 kids and you're trying to climb the corporate ladder and you're trying to do it all, right? At what cost? There's always, Dahlia and I are always talking about, like, at what cost is something happening? It's our
Yeah.
time, it's our energy, it's our focus, it's our mental health, our spiritual health. Like, there's always a cost to something. And so ideally, it's a regenerative cost, meaning we give and we get back hopefully the same, if not more. That's a regenerative cost. A non-regenerative cost, meaning you give and maybe you give more and you get back less. That is not sustainable. It takes time to identify this. It can be someone, can be something in your life that's doing this to you, and it takes time, one, to see it, takes time to identify it, and then take action on it. And that's also something we speak with patients on, and is very, very important. So that's a whole episode in of itself.
Yeah.
But very important. Yes.
Someone has a follow-up question, since I've been talking about nutrients and zinc. How much zinc is ideal?
Ooh.
So studies show if you do have Hashimoto's in particular and hypothyroidism, you want to go for about 30 milligrams of zinc per day. However, I always give this caveat because a lot of times with autoimmune inflammatory conditions, iron tends to be low. Inflammation destroys blood cells, and that's where iron is stored. So usually you'll have low iron. Zinc administration over 15 milligrams a day can hinder iron absorption and lower iron levels. So we do recommend separating them. So if you're eating an iron rich meal, don't take zinc with that meal. It says separate them by 30 to 60 minutes. I would suggest eat the iron first or take iron with your food. Take zinc after. Zinc can give you hypoglycemia symptoms because zinc causes your pancreas to release insulin. So annoying. Our body's so annoying. So I usually
So
say
beautiful
take
and
zinc
annoying.
after you've eaten. Have a
Yeah.
full stomach when you're going to take zinc, but about 30 milligrams is okay. I want to answer just a couple more
Okay.
questions. I feel like I could talk about this
And
all day.
and those
It
of you
seems like you guys
still
want us to
watching
keep
this
talking.
live, thank you. This is a deep and heavy live, so it's very dense and long. So we love it, and
But
it's crazy.
you
But we
all
love
seem
it.
to be engaged, which is great. And so somebody is asking,
Love, someone said, "Yay for broccoli and edamame."
yay
When
for
we're talking
broccoli and
about that.
edamame. So
Yes.
someone's asking, my dad had thyroid cancer and had his thyroid removed at age 55. My last TPO, so thyroid peroxidase antibody, which usually causes hypothyroidism, or implicated in hypothyroidism. My last was high at 173.5. Should I be concerned with taking any action based on that result? Thank you so much. That would be, I would say, higher than what we would ideally want to see. Again, less than 35, not medical advice. But if I were in that situation, I would try to make sure I'm adding zinc, I'm adding selenium, and
Generally
I would
speaking.
try gluten free for 3 to 6 months just as a start. So
Yeah.
if you're in that similar situation, okay, perfect. All right, guys, we have so many questions coming in. So we're going to try to kind of answer a few. This one, I've seen similar questions a few times. What could be a root cause for Clostridia overgrowth? What's the difference between Clostridia and C. diff? Somebody's just asking, what if you've had COVID? What if you've had EBV? How do you get rid of all these viruses? How do you kill those viruses?
We don't want to kill viruses, and really, I mean, some out there would argue you can't kill a virus, right? And viruses are so unique, they're so fascinating. The virome is so fascinating. We don't want to kill viruses. Viruses, we're finding, are in the placenta. Viruses are in our brain, in our lungs, in our gut, and we're realizing, oh my gosh, these viruses are here in places we thought were sterile not that long ago. And we're going, oh, there's a whole world of viruses. So what we're finding out, just like it's not about I mean, you guys remember all the commercials of disinfect, the 99 kills 99% of viruses and bacteria. We don't want to kill, we want to balance.
They
We
were
want
trying
to
to disinfect us in the 90s with all those
They were.
antibiotics too.
And that was, it was a quick fix, right? It was like, oh, you're feeling this, take an antibiotic, you feel so much better. But it's not, again, a sustainable action plan. It's a quick fix. So the goal is not to eliminate the viruses. The goal is to understand, how do we balance? That's the quick answer. And that could be many ways to do that. But ideally, you're hitting, like a lot of the things we covered today, you're hitting those low hanging fruit. You can go back and pause and rewind this at a replay. And a lot of the things we talk about in general is about balancing the ecosystem inside of you.
Yeah.
We talk about the inner ecosystem being the most important ecosystem. It's your gut microbiome, it's your virome, and they just need to be balanced, not killed.
A lot of times with viruses, once you have a virus come in, it will always be in your system.
Yeah.
It just goes dormant. So the goal is to not kill it, but keep it dormant. So we do know there are certain antiviral properties like herbs. Adding herbs to the diet can be
Mhm.
so helpful. There are so many antiviral herbs like thyme, lemongrass, oregano, cinnamon,
Yeah.
basil. So eat more herbs, eat more antioxidants, eat deeper color foods, eat in season foods, reduce inflammation because inflammation encourages viruses to turn back on, opportunistic bugs to kind of creep in. There are certain antiviral properties or just virus managing properties is what I can say in kind of the simplest terms. Like monolaurin is one that I often will use that kind of keeps some of these viruses asleep, keeps them dormant. But hit those basics before you're trying to kill. Not that we never use protocols with our patients. So maybe you're like, I'm your patient. We've done an antiviral or an antimicrobial protocol. It's really just identifying who is too much, what's the root cause, how can we get everybody back into better balance?
And a quick note on environmental factors. This is where Air Doctor, like that's why we have and promote the Air Doctor. We've seen studies that show PM 2.5, which is particulate matter. So if you live in a city, if you live in a highly polluted area, that's also not good. You're more likely to get a virus, contract a virus, and offset your virome as well as your microbiome because they're working harder to detox your body. So air filters and plants and being around trees and go in nature, those things also help to balance your virome, which is really cool. And a lot of those are free. Like you can go in nature, go to the park, get a plant. And a lot of these plants you can basically grow yourself, and they're very easy to grow. So yeah, really cool stuff.
All right, we're going to answer the last question.
Last
This is
one.
quite
All
the
right.
question.
What is
I have hypothyroidism with Hashimoto's. What type of diet do you recommend? So we recommend a plant-forward diet, whether you're fully plant-based or just predominantly plant-based. We've seen that that's helpful for everybody. Hashimoto's, IBS, any human. So try to eat more plants. If you're having trouble tolerating and digesting the plants, get some help so you can eat more plants. Again, like we saw, that study showed the Mediterranean diet was extremely helpful for lowering thyroid antibodies. So eat a plant-forward diet, 80+% plants. Again, if you need to, we talked today about possibly trialing a gluten-free diet, but eating an antioxidant-rich diet and lowering other sources of inflammation, whether it's mental and emotional inflammation that you're dealing with, whether it's unresolved trauma, whether it is environmental inflammation with something around or on your body that's causing inflammation. It's inflammation in your diet. Address that.
Yes.
And that's the type of diet that will help you heal with each meal.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, everybody. If you want to learn more, click down
If you
below.
want part two, tell
If you
us.
want part two, let us know. Go to marriedhealth.com.
If you've hung out with us and you lasted this whole hour and you're not like, that was too much.
You're awesome.
Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for participating in these lives. Oftentimes these lives are coming for you because you're asking us to talk about these topics. So we hope that this has helped you. I know these things have helped me as somebody who has lived with Hashimoto's again for almost almost 20 years, who has had IBS, who has gone through the gamut, not only with myself, but literally thousands of patients after being in practice for over a decade. These are things that we're learning in the data. I'm learning from my own experience, and I'm learning from talking to people every single day. The data will always evolve, but the foundations really don't change.
Yeah.
Thank you all for being here. We hope that this, again, can help you heal with each meal. We hope you have a great weekend, and
See you next
we
time.
will see you next time. If there are any other topics you want to hear about, let us know.
Bye, everyone.